6 hours after Patsy Ramsey's frantic 911 call, JonBenét body was found in the basement of her own home.
The murder of JonBenét Ramsey.
JonBenét was found dead in Boulder. JonBenét Ramsey.
There's always a story behind the headlines.
But in time, we would see that this isn't what we think it is.
That line between entertainment and journalism was almost non-existent.
Police and investigators have assured us that this is a case that can be solved.
The whites.
I think this is the last picture that was ever taken of her alive.
I don't remember the hair being that long, but...
It wake you up?
She woke me up.
And she's running around your room saying, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. What else did she say? Did you know she was looking for JonBenét?
I remember her saying, where's my baby, where's my baby?
So after she left, what did you do?
I just laid there and didn't really know what else to do.
He spoke a lot with a smile on his face. Could you smile like that when talking about the death of a loved one, and more than that? Why exactly now?
And you're one of those three, you, your mother, and your father. But in the 20 years that have gone by, you're the one that has never spoken. You've never talked about this publicly, and you've decided to do so now. My question for you is why now, and why here?
People say that he was jealous of JonBenét and killed her to get attention, and this time it's the same. But is it really that simple? So, is Burke the killer or not? If not, then who is? Burke Ramsey was the older brother of JonBenét Ramsey. Born in 1987, he was 9 years old when his sister was found murdered in their Boulder, Colorado home in December 1996. As the only other child in the Ramsey household, Burke's presence in the case has always lingered on the edges of suspicion. Not as an officially named suspect, but as someone whose behavior and position in the home raised critical questions. He was not charged, and DNA evidence found at the crime scene did not match him. Yet, investigators and analysts such as James Kohler and the CBS investigative team have kept his name in the conversation, pointing to behavioral red flags and the psychological undercurrents of family dynamics. Understanding Burke's childhood behavior and emotional landscape is essential to evaluating the plausibility of any theory involving him. He was a quiet, reserved boy known to keep to himself. Former housekeeper Linda Wilcox described him as a child who lived in his own world. He rarely took part in family-centered events and had no strong presence during social occasions like the Ramseys' Christmas party. Unlike JonBenét, who was energetic and enjoyed the attention of pageants, Burke was distant, almost invisible. Wilcox even noted that he never had sleepovers at the house, an unusual detail for a boy his age. He didn't connect with others easily, including his own family. Burke rarely displayed emotions in any obvious way. Wilcox recalled never seeing him show affection toward his parents or his sister. He wasn't prone to smiling, laughing, or engaging naturally like a typical child. In family photos and events, he either faded into the background or simply wasn't there. If JonBenét was the spotlight, Burke was the shadow, always nearby but never fully seen. He never caused scenes or got into visible fights. There were, however, moments that suggested something deeper was going on. One such moment came after an Easter church service when JonBenét wore a new, expensive dress and received a great deal of attention. According to Wilcox, Burke asked his mother, "Mom, am I fat?" A striking question from a 9-year-old boy. That one comment hinted at a sense of inadequacy and jealousy. He noticed the adoration JonBenét received and internalized the comparison. Wilcox noted that JonBenét was the only happy person in the house. She had her own room, designer clothes, a VCR, and was doted on by the family. Burke, on the other hand, had no such status. His world was quieter, less adorned, and seemingly more isolated. Burke also exhibited several troubling behaviors that raised concerns about his emotional and behavioral regulation. He frequently engaged in whittling with a sharp, Red Scout knife, a dangerous tool for a child, scattering wood shavings throughout the house without cleaning them up. This repetitive and risky behavior which went unchecked until the housekeeper, Linda Hoffman, Poog, hid the knife in a cupboard near JonBenét's room after Thanksgiving, suggests a need for control and a lack of supervision, potentially reflecting impulsivity or a passive demand for attention. Additionally, Burke struggled with prolonged bedwetting until age 7, requiring pull-up diapers consistently for over 2.5 years, as noted by housekeeper Linda Wilcox. This issue, which ceased when his mother's attention shifted to JonBenet, who then began wetting the bed more frequently, points to a possible intentional response to feeling neglected rather than a purely physical condition, highlighting underlying sibling rivalry and emotional stress. More concerning were Burke's actions involving feces, which indicated deeper emotional turmoil. During the period when his mother, Patsy, was battling cancer, housekeeper Geraldine Vodeka reported that Burke smeared feces on a bathroom wall, a serious behavior for a child over 3, suggesting emotional trauma or passive-aggressive defiance. The lack of reprimand or correction from his parents, with the cleanup left to hired help under his grandmother Nidra's direction, underscores a significant absence of parental intervention. Further, crime scene investigators found oversized pajama pants, stained with human feces in JonBenét's bedroom, believed to belong to Burke. This deliberate placement in his sister's personal space suggests a targeted act of provocation or resentment, consistent with passive-aggressive behavior. Similarly, a candy box belonging to JonBenet, a cherished personal item, was found smeared with human feces, an act that James Kohler noted as particularly puzzling. This behavior, likely an expression of psychological retaliation, violated his sister's emotional and physical boundaries, reflecting unaddressed jealousy or conflict. Additionally, Burke's history includes a physical altercation where he struck JonBenet with a plastic or toy golf club while playing outside, an incident confirmed by their mother, Patsy, during police questioning and mentioned in Lawrence Schiller's Perfect Murder, Perfect Town. Though described as an accident resulting in a minor bruise or redness, with no medical records to indicate severity, this event points to a pattern of physical aggression toward his sister. These behaviors collectively point to underlying emotional and psychological issues, likely exacerbated by inadequate parental supervision and attention. Whittling with a dangerous tool reflects repetitive behavior, often used to self-regulate and assert control in emotionally neglectful environments, with the lack of cleanup suggesting passive-aggressive tendencies aimed at gaining attention. Prolonged bedwetting, especially ceasing when attention dynamics shifted, indicates a psychological response to stress or perceived neglect, functioning as a deliberate act to express distress rather than a solely physical condition. Feces smearing, including on walls, clothing, and personal items, is a severe indicator of emotional trauma or passive-aggressive defiance, particularly during times of family turmoil, and the absence of parental intervention highlights a lack of structure. The golf club incident, even if accidental, suggests difficulties with impulse control and conflict resolution, common in children lacking guidance in managing emotions. These actions, ranging from risky to invasive to physically aggressive, reflect emotional dysregulation and sibling rivalry, intensified by a family environment lacking consistent boundaries and emotional support. Psychological intervention and family therapy would be essential to address these patterns and prevent further escalation. The emotional distance within the Ramsey household created a fertile ground for Burke's feelings of jealousy toward JonBenet. Housekeeper Linda Wilcox described the parents as unaffectionate, with Patsy acting more like John's secretary than his wife, and no overt displays of warmth toward Burke were noted. Mornings often saw Patsy preoccupied with JonBenét's needs, while John expressed frustration over having to dress Burke himself, complaining about not finding suitable clothes. This lack of care in preparing Burke contrasted with the meticulous attention given to JonBenét's appearance, likely left him feeling overlooked. Initially, Burke was Patsy's primary focus, but as JonBenet grew and began competing in beauty pageants, Patsy redirected her energy, time, and resources toward her daughter's elaborate costumes, photo shoots and rehearsals. This shift relegated Burke to a secondary role, fostering emotional instability that manifested in behaviors like ceasing bedwetting when attention waned, suggesting a passive response to being sidelined. Burke's sense of being less prioritized extended to his physical and social environment. Unlike JonBené, who had her own bedroom equipped with a VCR for watching movies, Burke lacked similar privileges and often retreated to the basement to play with his model trains alone. Wilcox noted that while JonBené occasionally slept over at friends' houses, Burke never had friends stay over, indicating a lack of encouragement or comfort in building his own social circle. This isolation likely deepened his sense of being undervalued compared to his sister, who was celebrated for her pageant appearances and fashionable outfits, such as an expensive Easter dress that drew widespread praise. The parents' cold, utilitarian approach further underscored the disparity in how the siblings were treated. John, described as meticulous and emotionally distant, once abruptly turned off Wilcox's vacuum cleaner without explanation, reflecting his detachment. When Burke contracted chickenpox, Patsy's concern was not his health, but whether JonBenét's facial blemishes could be cleared in time for a photo shoot, prioritizing her daughter's image over her son's well-being. Despite no overt conflicts between Burke and JonBenet, both children lived somewhat separate lives, with JonBenet watching movies alone and Burke engaging with his own friends. The lack of direct confrontation did not negate underlying tensions. Burke's question, "What's wrong with me?" Everybody's oohing and ahing over her. After JonBenét's Easter dress drew admiration, and the shift in bedwetting patterns when Patsy's focus moved to JonBenet suggest a deep-seated jealousy. These subtle signs of emotional injury, rooted in the unequal attention and resources lavished on his sister, painted a picture of a boy grappling with feelings of neglect and resentment in a household where he felt perpetually overshadowed. For his position in this case, it is sarcastic when the disappearance is the thing that people reminded the most about Burke. On the night of December 25, 1996, the Ramsey family returned to their home at 755 15th Street in Boulder, Colorado, after attending a Christmas party at the home of their friends, Fleet and Priscilla White. The family had spent the evening celebrating with a group of close acquaintances, and Burke Ramsey, the 9-year-old son of John and Patsy Ramsey, was among those present. At the party, Burke was seen by the Whites and other guests, engaging in the typical activities of a child during a festive gathering. There were no reports of unusual behavior from Burke during this time, and he appeared to be enjoying the holiday atmosphere alongside his younger sister, JonBenet, and their parents. The Ramsey family left the White residence around 9 to 9:30 p.m., traveling back to their home in 2 separate cars. According to the parents' accounts, JonBenet fell asleep during the car ride, exhausted from the day's festivities, and John carried her upstairs to her bedroom upon their arrival. Burke, however, remained awake for a short period after reaching home, marking the last clear point of his known activities before the tragic events that would unfold. Upon returning home, Patsy Ramsey prepared a light snack for Burke in the kitchen, consisting of pineapple and either tea or milk. This moment, occurring around 9:30 to 10 p.m., was one of the last instances where Burke's presence was explicitly accounted for by a family member before the household retired for the night. Patsy later confirmed that she interacted with Burke during this time as they shared a quiet moment in the kitchen. The pineapple snack would later become a significant detail in the investigation, but for the purpose of understanding Burke's whereabouts, it establishes that he was in the kitchen with his mother shortly after the family's return. After this, Patsy stated that Burke went to his bedroom on the 2nd floor, near JonBenét's room and the master bedroom, to sleep. However, at this point, there is no indication that Burke was anywhere other than the main living areas or his bedroom, as per his mother's recollection. No other individuals, outside of Patsy, are known to have seen or interacted with Burke during this brief period at home before bedtime, from approximately 10 p.m. on December 25 to 5:52 a.m. on December 26, When Patsy Ramsey made a frantic 911 call to report JonBenét's disappearance, there is a significant gap in verifiable information about Burke's whereabouts and activities. According to John and Patsy Ramsey, Burke was asleep in his bedroom throughout the night, unaware of any disturbances in the house. His room, located on the second floor, was close to the staircase where a ransom note was later discovered, and near JonBenét's bedroom, yet the parents maintained that Burke did not wake up or hear anything unusual. This period, spanning roughly 8 hours, is where the lack of independent witnesses or physical evidence creates an absence of clarity about Burke's precise location. No neighbors, visitors, or external sources reported seeing or hearing Burke during this time, and the Ramsey family's account relies solely on their own statements that Burke remained in his room, asleep, as the tragic events unfolded elsewhere in the house. The absence of external corroboration for Burke's whereabouts during this critical window is what contributes to the notion of his disappearance. The Ramsey home was not equipped with security cameras, and there were no reports of anyone outside the immediate family being present in the house during the night. Unlike JonBenet, whose movements were later pieced together through forensic evidence, John and Patsy, who were active in the early morning hours, Burke's presence is undocumented beyond the family's claims. The only individuals who could potentially interacted with or seen Burke during this time were his parents. But their statements focus on their own activities, Patsy discovering the ransom note and John checking on JonBenét's room, without mention of checking on Burke until later. This lack of direct observation by anyone, including the parents, leaves a void in the timeline, as no one outside the family can confirm whether Burke remained in his bedroom or moved elsewhere in the house during the night. At 5:52 a.m. on December 26, Patsy Ramsey called 911, reporting that JonBenet was missing and that a ransom note had been found on the staircase. At this point, Burke's whereabouts remain unverified by external parties. The parents stated that Burke was still asleep in his room when the call was made, and that he did not wake up until after the police arrived. Around 6 a.m., the first officers on the scene, including Officer Rick French, focused their attention on securing the house and speaking with John and Patsy, who were in a state of distress. There is no record of any police officer or responder seeing or interacting with Burke immediately upon their arrival, as the focus was on the missing child and the ransom note. Burke's presence in the home during these initial moments is thus inferred from the parents' claims, rather than confirmed by independent observation. The absence of any direct interaction between Burke and the responding officers further underscores the gap in his documented activities during the early morning hours. Shortly after the police arrived, arrangements were made to remove Burke from the chaotic environment of the Ramsey home, likely to shield him from the unfolding investigation and the growing presence of law enforcement and family friends. By around 7 a.m., or shortly thereafter, Burke was taken to the home of Fleet and Priscilla White, the same family who had hosted the Christmas party the previous evening. This marks the next clear point in Burke's timeline, as he was physically removed from the Ramsey residence and placed in the care of close family friends. Fleet White, a trusted confidant of John Ramsey, is believed to have facilitated Burke's transport to their home, though the exact details of who drove him or at what precise time are not well documented in public records. Upon arrival at the White residence, Burke was seen and cared for by Priscilla White and other members of the White family, who provided a safe space for him as the investigation intensified at the Ramsey home. At the White residence, Burke spent the remainder of December 26, 1996, away from the media frenzy and police activity that engulfed his family's home. The Whites, who had known Burke for years, were among the few individuals who interacted with him that day, offering support and supervision. There are no detailed accounts of Burke's specific interactions at the White home, but it is understood that he remained there for most of the day, under the care of Priscilla and possibly other family members or friends present. Burke did not return to the Ramsey home that day, and there are no reports of him speaking with police or other authorities while at the White residence. His time there represents a period of relative isolation from the investigation, as the focus remained on his parents and the discovery of John's body in the basement around 1 p.m. By staying at the White home, Burke was seen by a small, trusted circle of family friends. But no further details about his activities, or additional interactions, or December 26 are publicly available. The prime suspect. One of the most prominent theories in the JonBenét Ramsey case is the child negligent homicide hypothesis, which suggests that Burke Ramsey, who was 9 years old at the time, may have unintentionally caused his sister's death. Investigators such as Jim Clement, a former FBI profiler, Werner Spitz, a forensic pathologist, and James Kohler, a former Boulder investigator, have posited that Burke could have struck JonBenét in a moment of anger. According to this theory, the Ramsey parents, John and Patsy, subsequently staged the crime scene, including the ransom note and the garrote, to protect their surviving child. The note, which demanded lettered $8,000, a sum matching John Ramsey's Christmas bonus, appeared to some experts to be a deliberate fabrication, possibly to divert suspicion from the family. The theory suggests that a spontaneous act by Burke, perhaps during a sibling dispute, could explain these anomalies. Another key pieces anomalies, often cited in connection with Burke Ramsey, is the presence of undigested pineapple in JonBenét's stomach, discovered during the autopsy. Forensic analysis indicated that JonBenét consumed the pineapple approximately 1 to 2 hours before her death, placing the timing close to family's return home from a Christmas party on December 25, 1996. In the Ramsey kitchen, investigators found a bowl of pineapple with a spoon, bearing the fingerprints of Patsy Ramsey and Burke. Patsy later confirmed that she had prepared a snack of pineapple for Burke around 9:30 to 10:00 p.m. that evening, after the family returned from the White residence. This detail has fueled speculation that Burke and JonBenét were together in the kitchen, potentially leading to a confrontation that escalated into violence. The pineapple evidence places Burke in a specific location, the kitchen, at a time close to the estimated window of JonBenét's death, lending credence to theories that an altercation between the siblings could have occurred. Among the pieces of evidence considered in the JonBenét Ramsey case, the flashlight found in the Ramsey home has drawn significant attention from investigators and theorists. On the morning of December 26, 1996, after Patsy Ramsey's 911 call, police discovered a large, black maglite flashlight on the kitchen counter of the Ramsey residence at 755 15th Street in Boulder, Colorado. This flashlight, a common household item, was noted for its weight and solid metal construction, making it a potential blunt object capable of inflicting serious injury. Forensic pathologist Werner Spitz suggested that the flashlight could have been the weapon used to cause the 8-inch fracture found on JonBenét's head during her autopsy. The injury, a critical factor in her death, was consistent with a blow from a heavy, rounded object, and the flashlight's size and shape made it a plausible match. Investigators like Jim Clemente and James Kohler, who explored the theory that Burke Ramsey might have been involved, pointed to the flashlight's accessibility in the kitchen, where Burke was known to have been eating a snack of pineapple earlier that evening, suggesting he could have picked it up during a moment of anger, possibly during a dispute with JonBenét. Adding to the complexity, some reports indicate that a similar maglite flashlight was believed to belong to John Ramsey, reportedly a gift from his son, John Andrew Ramsey, raising questions about the true ownership of the flashlight found on the counter. This uncertainty about whether the flashlight belonged to Burke, John, or another household member has fueled speculation about its role in the crime and who might have handled it. However, no DNA, fingerprints, blood, or biological evidence was found on the flashlight to link it directly to Burke, JonBenét, or the crime itself, leaving its significance as a potential murder weapon a matter of debate. Another item of interest in the investigation is a Swiss Army knife found in the basement of the Ramsey home, near the area where JonBenét's body was discovered. The knife, identified as belonging to Burke Ramsey, was located in the wine cellar or an adjacent space, close to other household items like Patsy Ramsey's paint tote. Burke, an avid participant in activities like Boy Scouts, was known to carry and use the knife for various tasks, such as whittling or outdoor play. James Kohler, in his book Foreign Faction, Who Really Kidnapped JonBené, highlighted the knife's potential relevance, noting that the white nylon cord used to kill JonBené showed signs of being cleanly cut, suggesting a sharp blade like that of a Swiss Army knife was involved. The cord, believed to have come from Patsy's paint tote, was used to fashion the garrote found around JonBené's neck, prompting speculation that the knife could have been used to prepare the cord, either by Burke or by someone staging the scene. The knife's presence in the basement, a place where Burke often played, fueled theories that he might have brought it there or left it among his belongings. However, no forensic evidence, such as DNA, fingerprints, or blood, was reported on the knife to connect it directly to the crime or to Burke's actions on the night of December 25, 1996. Some reports suggest that Patsy had previously confiscated the knife from Burke due to safety concerns, only for it to reappear in the basement, raising questions about how and when it got there. Without direct physical evidence linking the knife to the cord or the crime, its role remains speculative, and its placement in the basement could simply reflect the cluttered nature of the Ramsey household's storage areas. The toy train track, part of Burke Ramsey's playthings, is another piece of evidence that has been scrutinized in the context of the JonBené Ramsey case. Found in the basement near the wine cellar, where JonBené's body was discovered, the train track set belonged to Burke, who frequently played in that area of the house. During the autopsy, small, circular marks were observed on JonBené's back and face, described as superficial abrasions that were not the cause of death, but occurred around the time of the attack. James Kohler proposed that these marks could have been caused by the metal pins or connectors used to assemble the toy train tracks, which Burke often handled. The pins, small and pointed, could theoretically produce marks similar to those found on JonBené's body if used to poke or jab her, either intentionally or accidentally. This theory suggests that Burke, familiar with the train set, might have used a piece of it during an altercation with his sister, possibly in the basement where they both spent time. The proximity of the train tracks to the crime scene, combined with their ownership by Burke, made them a point of interest for investigators, exploring the possibility of his involvement. However, no forensic evidence, such as dead blood or tissue, was found on the train track pieces to confirm their use as a weapon or tool in the crime. Additionally, alternative explanations for the marks exist, with investigator Lou Smith, a seasoned detective hired by the Boulder District Attorney's Office, arguing that they were consistent with the use of a stun gun by an intruder. Smith conducted experiments using a stun gun on pig skin, which he believed mimicked human skin, to demonstrate that the marks' size, shape, and paired pattern matched those produced by a stun gun's electrodes, supporting his theory of an external perpetrator. These experiments, conducted in 1997, aimed to show that the marks were not random abrasions but deliberate injuries caused by a device not found in the Ramsey home, challenging the train track hypothesis. The lack of definitive forensic linkage to the train tracks, coupled with Smith's stun gun theory and the possibility that the marks resulted from another source, weakens the train track's significance, leaving its role in the case a subject of debate among investigators. Back to the morning of December 26, 1996, at 5:52 am, the contention surrounding Burke's alleged presence in the 911 call stems from an enhanced audio analysis conducted by experts.
Hey, Patsy.
These analysts claim to detect a brief exchange in the background after Patsy Ramsey appeared to hang up the phone, but before the call fully disconnected. Some interpretations suggest that a young voice, possibly Burke's, can be heard asking questions like, "What did you find?" or similar phrases, with responses from John and Patsy Ramsey. This has led to speculation that Burke was not only awake, but also near his parents in the kitchen or living area, where the call was made, raising questions about why the Ramseys insisted he was asleep. The presence of Burke's voice, if confirmed, would contradict the timeline provided by his parents, who maintained that he remained in his room until police arrived around 6 a.m. following the tragic death of JonBenéт Ramsey on December 26, 1996. The Ramsey family took several steps that limited Burke Ramsey's direct interaction with law enforcement. One of the most notable actions was the significant delay in allowing formal police interviews with the family. After the discovery of JonBenét's body, the Boulder Police Department sought immediate interviews with John and Patsy Ramsey, but the couple devised by their legal team did not participate in official interviews until April 30, 1997, over 4 months later. During this period, communication with the police was handled through their attorneys, with only limited information provided. This delay was seen by some investigators as an effort to control the flow of information, particularly regarding Burke, who was present in the home during the crime. The Ramseys maintained that they were cooperating within the bounds of their legal rights, providing handwriting samples, DNA, and other materials early on, but needed time to grieve and prepare legally due to their perception of being unfairly targeted as suspects. This postponement extended to Burke, ensuring that he was not directly questioned by police in the critical early days of the investigation, thereby isolating him from immediate investigative pressure. The Ramsey family further insulated Burke by tightly controlling his interactions with law enforcement. Burke, who was in the house on the night of the crime, was not formally interviewed until January 10, 1997, 2 weeks after the incident, and then only by a social worker and a psychologist, with legal representatives present. A subsequent appearance before a grand jury in 1999 was similarly restricted, with the family's attorneys imposing conditions on the scope of questions asked. These controlled settings limited the depth of inquiries directed at Burke, who, as a potential witness, could have provided insight in the events of December 25, 1996. The family's rationale was that Burke, being only 9 years old, was emotionally vulnerable and needed protection from the stress of police interrogations and media attention. They argued that his supervised interviews were sufficient, and further, direct questioning was unnecessary, effectively keeping Burke at a distance from the investigative process. To bolster their efforts to protect Burke, the Ramseys employed a team of prominent attorneys, including Lynn Wood, and private investigators to conduct a parallel investigation. Immediately after the murder, they hired legal counsel from Atlanta and investigators who pursued the intruder theory, focusing on evidence like unidentified DNA and signs of a disturbed basement window. This approach allowed the family to shift attention away from Burke and themselves, presenting an alternative narrative that did not involve the household. Critics viewed this as an attempt to undermine the official police engagement by selectively sharing information. But the Ramseys countered that they lacked confidence in the Boulder Police Department due to early mishandling of the crime scene. Their private investigators, such as Lou Smith, later collaborated with the district attorney's office, suggesting a level of cooperation, but the initial reliance on private resources helped keep Burke out of the direct line of police inquiry. Additionally, the Ramseys provided information to law enforcement under strict conditions, further distancing Burke from scrutiny. While they agreed to supply physical evidence like DNA and handwriting samples, they often required advance notice of interview questions or the presence of attorneys during discussions. For instance, when John and Patsy were finally interviewed in April 1997, they insisted on being questioned together rather than separately, a condition that investigators found problematic as it could compromise the independence of their statements. This controlled approach to sharing information extended to Burke's involvement. as the family ensured that any discussion about him was carefully managed through their legal team. The Ramseys maintained that these conditions were necessary to protect their rights, particularly in light of their belief that they were being unfairly treated as suspects without solid evidence. By setting these bound evidence, they effectively minimized Burke's exposure to direct police questioning, maintaining a protective barrier around him during the investigation's most intense phases. Despite the obstacles from the Ramsey family, the investigators started to approach Burke Ramsey right on December 26, 1996, the day JonBenéт Ramsey was reported missing. Burke was briefly interviewed by police at the family's home in Boulder, Colorado, before his sister's body was discovered in the basement. During this interview, conducted without clear parental consent, Burke provided several notable statements about the morning's events. He described being in his bedroom when his mother, Patsy, rushed in, frantically turning on the light and searching for JonBenéт. Burke recounted hearing his mother's distress as she exclaimed about his sister's absence, which left him feeling scared and worried. He stated that he remained in his room even as police and neighbors arrived at the house, choosing not to venture out despite the commotion. Burke also shared that he initially thought JonBenét might be hiding somewhere in the house, prompting him to ask an officer if they had searched the entire home. He emphasized that he heard no unusual noises during the night, insisting he had been asleep and unaware of any disturbances. Burke's demeanor during this interview was described as reserved and somewhat detached, which some later analyses attributed to the situation or his young age. He appeared cooperative but provided minimal details, sticking to short, straightforward answers without elaborating unless prompted. His tone suggested a mix of fear and confusion, consistent with a child processing a chaotic and frightening situation, though he did not display overt emotional distress. Some investigators noted that Burke seemed hesitant to engage fully, possibly due to the intimidating presence of police or the overwhelming circumstances. The lack of parental supervision during the interview, coupled with the presence of an unidentified woman claiming to be his grandmother, but later clarified as not being a relative, raised questions about the context in which Burke's statements were given, with some suggesting he may have felt guarded or uncertain about what to say. On January 8, 1997, 9-year-old Burke Ramsey was interviewed by Drucher. Suzanne Bernhard, a child psychologist at the Child Advocacy Center in Newitt, Colorado, roughly 2 weeks after the murder of his sister, JonBenéт. The interview, conducted in a play-like setting to make Burke feel at ease, revealed several notable statements. Burke expressed that he felt safe, despite his sister's recent murder in their home, a response Drucher, Bernhard found unusual for a child in such circumstances. When discussing his family, he described his father, John, as quiet and often preoccupied with work, and his mother, Patsy, as a typical mother who frequently hugged him. However, he was guarded when talking about family dynamics, stating the worst thing they did was not buy him expensive toys, which suggested a reluctance to disclose deeper issues. On the topic of bedwetting, a reported issue in the Ramsey household, Burke denied it was a current problem, claiming it happened a long time ago, despite records indicating otherwise. When asked about JonBenét's death, Burke's responses were strikingly detached. He said, "Everything's okay," and merely answered, "Yes," when asked if he missed his sister. Most notably, he described his theory of the murder in a casual tone, suggesting someone quietly took JonBenét to the basement, pulled out a knife, and stabbed her or hit her with a hammer, even mimicking these violent actions with a nonchalant demeanor. Burke's attitude during the interview was marked by a lack of emotional engagement, which Drucher, Bernhard, and later analysts, like Jim Clement, found concerning for a child discussing his sister's brutal death. He appeared cooperative, but emotionally distant, offering brief answers and showing little distress, occasionally smiling or chuckling when recounting violent details, which was deemed inappropriate for the context. This detachment led some to speculate about shock, emotional repression, or possible coaching by adults, though no evidence confirmed the latter. Burke's guarded responses and minimal emotional display suggested a discomfort with vulnerability, possibly influenced by the sensitive nature of the topic or the unfamiliar setting, despite the psychologist's efforts to create a relaxed environment. In 1998, 11-year-old Burke Ramsey was interviewed by Detective Dan Schuler, nearly 2 years after the murder of his sister, JonBené. This formal interview, which was recorded and later partially released, provided insight into Burke's recollections of surrounding December 25, 1996. Burke recounted waking up early that Christmas morning to open presents with JonBené, playing with new toys, and noticing nothing unusual during the night. He described his mother, Patsy, in a state of panic, rushing into his room and exclaiming, oh my gosh," as she searched for his sister. Burke stated he stayed in his bedroom, even as police and neighbors arrived, feeling scared but choosing not to leave his room to investigate the commotion. He recalled learning of JonBené's death when his father, John, told him she was in heaven, while they were at a friend's house later that day. When questioned about a bowl of pineapple found on the kitchen table, which bore his fingerprints and was linked to JonBené's autopsy findings, Burke became visibly uncomfortable, avoiding direct answers and covering his mouth, a reaction later noted by analysts as a sign of potential unease or withholding. When asked about the ransom note, he sidestepped questioned its handwriting, commenting only that it looked too sloppy compared to his mother's insistence on neat penmanship, a response some analysts found evasive. He firmly denied hearing any unusual sounds, such as those potentially linked to a stun gun, emphasizing that he slept deeply and disliked confrontation. This emotional detachment, coupled with his insistence on remaining uninvolved in the morning's events, struck investigators and analysts, including Jim Clementi and Laura Richards, as unusual for a child reflecting on such a traumatic loss. In the interviews conducted with Burke Ramsey as a child, body language analysis by experts have highlighted several consistent patterns in his behavior that have sparked discussion about his emotional and possible psychological conditions, such as standing for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. In the January 8, 1997 interview with Drewster, Suzanne Bernhard, Burke's body language and verbal responses drew significant attention for their lack of emotional depth. He displayed a casual demeanor when discussing JonBenét's death, even mimicking violent actions like stabbing or hitting with a hammer while smiling or chuckling, which Drewster Bernhard and analysts like Jim Clement found highly unusual for a child discussing a sibling's murder. This incongruous effect, smiling during serious topics, has been speculated by some, including Drewster Lillian Glass in a 2016 blog post, to suggest possible neurodivergent conditions like autism or AD, where emotional regulation or social cues might be impaired. After a long time escaped from the media, the appearance of Burke Ramsey on the Giger Phil Show, aired on September 12, 13, and 19, 2016, marked his first public discussion of his sister JonBenét's murder, nearly 20 years after the tragic event that occurred on December 26, 1996. Conducted in Atlanta, Georgia, the three-part interview was timed to coincide with the 20th anniversary of the case, drawing renewed attention to the unsolved mystery. However, the interview quickly became one of the most controversial moments in Burke's public life, sparking debates over his demeanor, responses, and the motives behind his decision to break his long-standing silence. The timing was particularly contentious, as it preceded the airing of a CBS documentary, The Case of JonBenét Ramsey, which posited that Burke, at 9 years old, may have accidentally killed his sister and that his parents staged the crime scene to protect him. One of the primary controversies surrounding it was Burke's demeanor, which many viewers found jarring. Throughout the discussion, he frequently smiled or chuckled when addressing serious questions about JonBenét's death, a reaction that struck some as inappropriate given the gravity of the topic. For instance, when Phil asked, "Did you hit your sister over the head with a baseball bat or a flashlight?" Burke responded with a slight smile, saying, I don't know what to say to that, because I know that's not what happened. There's no way a 9-year-old kid could do that. This response, coupled with his visible amusement, led some viewers to describe him as cold or emotionally detached, while his seemingly detached reactions at age 9 could be attributed to his youth and limited understanding of death and grief. The persistence of this demeanor into adulthood, when his psychological and emotional maturity would be expected to reflect a deeper response, raises questions about what Burke is truly thinking and what experiences may have shaped his behavior. Analysts of body language suggested that his smiles could be a sign of nervousness or a coping mechanism under pressure, but others, including some investigators, viewed them as suspicious, arguing they indicated a lack of remorse or discomfort with the subject matter. Dr. Phil defended Burke, describing him as a reserved individual unaccustomed to media attention, whose behavior reflected a non-confrontational personality rather than guilt. The Ramsey family's attorney also argued that Burke's reactions were natural for someone who had spent 2 decades avoiding the spotlight. But public reaction, particularly on social media platforms, was largely critical, with many expressing discomfort at his apparent lack of emotional depth when discussing such a traumatic event. Another significant point of contention was Burke's categorical denial of any involvement in JonBenét's death, which clashed with the narrative presented in the upcoming documentary. When directly asked, "Did you murder your sister JonBené?" Burke firmly stated, "No, I didn't do anything," and suggested that the killer was likely a pedophile who had seen JonBené at a beauty pageant and targeted her. He also dismissed the theory that his parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, staged the crime scene to protect him, noting, "A lot of people say a 9-year-old kid couldn't do that." These denials were central to the interview's purpose, as Burke sought to counter accusations that had persisted since 1996. However, his responses were criticized for lacking depth or new information to refute specific evidence, such as the pineapple found in JonBenét's stomach or the fingerprints on a bowl in the kitchen, which the 2016 documentary used to support its theory. The absence of detailed rebuttals led some to question the credibility of his statements, with critics arguing that his confident denials or evasive. Supporters, however, viewed his responses as consistent with the family's long-standing claim of innocence, asserting that a lack of new details was understandable given the passage of time and Burke's young age at the time of the crime. The interview also stirred debate over Burke's comments regarding the 9/11 call made by Patsy Ramsey at 5052 on December 26, 1996. When Phil raised this issue, Burke confirmed that he was in bed at the time, but admitted to coming downstairs to the kitchen afterward, where he learned JonBené was missing. He explained that he chose to stay in bed because it felt safer amid the chaos, saying, "Was scared. I had no idea what was going on." His account failed to directly address the audio analysis, suggesting his presence during the call, leading some to find his explanation unconvincing. Critics argued that his failure to clarify the discrepancy fueled suspicions that the family had been untruthful about his whereabouts. Conversely, supporters, including the Ramsey family's legal team, contended that the poor audio quality made it impossible to confirm Burke's voice, dismissing the claim as speculative and emphasizing that his recollection aligned with a child's natural response to a frightening situation. The timing and motivation for Burke's appearance on the show were also highly contentious. When asked, "Why now and why here?" Burke explained, "For a long time the media basically made our lives crazy. It's hard to miss the cameras and news trucks in your front yard. So I was pretty skeptical of any sort of media. As to why I'm doing it now, it's the 20th anniversary, and there's apparently still a lot of attention around it." This response suggested that Burke chose to speak to honor his sister's memory and counter ongoing speculation. However, the interview's proximity to the documentary's release led many to suspect it was a strategic move, possibly orchestrated by the Ramsey family's attorney, to preempt the documentary's accusations. Some commentators speculated that Burke and his legal team were aware of the narrative and sought to shape public perception before it aired. Critics viewed this as an attempt to control the narrative, while supporters argued that Burke's decision to speak after years of silence was a courageous effort to reclaim his family's story and affirm their innocence, especially given the renewed media frenzy surrounding the case's anniversary. Another controversy arose from Burke's response to the suggestion that his parents were not protecting him but hiding him from scrutiny. He replied, "For the last 20 years, I wanted to grow up like a normal kid, which does not include going in front of TV cameras. To me, it seemed like it would rouse it all up again." This statement aimed to clarify that his parents' actions were protective, shielding him from media pressure rather than concealing guilt. However, some viewers interpreted his words as evasive, noting that he avoided directly addressing why his parents tightly controlled his interactions with investigators. The Ramsey family maintained that their efforts were to ensure Burke had a normal childhood, but critics argued that this explanation did not fully account for the family's restrictive approach to police interviews, particularly in the early stages of the investigation. The public's divided reaction highlighted the tension between those who saw Burke's reticence as a natural response to trauma and those who viewed it as an attempt to deflect scrutiny. Finally, the interview sparked significant controversy due to the subsequent legal action it prompted. Following the CB's documentary's airing, which reiterated the theory that Burke accidentally killed JonBené, he filed a $750 million defamation against CB's and its contributing experts, arguing that their claims were baseless and damaging. The lawsuit, settled out of court in 2019 for an undisclosed amount, was seen by some as a defensive move to silence speculation, further fueling debate about Burke's motives for appearing on the jury. Phil Show. Critics argued that the timing of the interview and lawsuit suggested a coordinated effort to counter the narrative of the documentary, while supporters saw it as a justified response to unfounded accusations. The controversy underscored the ongoing divide between those who believed the Ramsey family was hiding the truth and those who viewed them of unfair media scrutiny, with the interview serving as a flashpoint for these conflicting perspectives. Burke is guilty. In a 1997 interview, Burke Ramsey was questioned about what he knew regarding his sister's death, revealing details that have sparked intrigue and debate. When asked if he knew what happened, Burke responded, "I know what happened," explaining that he had asked his father, John Ramsey, where JonBenét's body was found, and was told it was in the basement. He then speculated, "I think that someone took her very quietly and tiptoed down the basement, and then maybe took a knife out and he went, something like that," accompanied by a stabbing motion. When the psychologist, Dr. Bernhard, probed further, asking if he thought that's how she died, Burke offered an alternative, saying, "Or maybe a hammer hit her in the head, maybe," mimicking a striking motion. These statements, eerily close to the actual cause of JonBenét's death, a fracture and possible strangulation, raise questions about how Burke, a young child, could describe such a scenario. His knowledge appears to stem from his father's disclosure about the location of the body, but the specificity of a hammer or knife suggests he may have absorbed details from adult conversations, media coverage, or even local stories, such as a 1984 Colorado case involving a killer using a knife and hammer, though this connection is purely speculative. Burke's comments, while striking, do not necessarily implicate him as the perpetrator and may instead indicate he was piecing together fragments of information as a child, trying to make sense of a tragedy. His initial mention of a knife, followed by a shift to a hammer when prompted, suggests he was guessing rather than recounting first-hand knowledge, as he would not have needed to ask his father about the body's location if he had witnessed the event. This raises the possibility that Burke was exposed to external influences, like tabloid speculation or overheard discussions, shaping his understanding. Alternatively, his vivid description could hint that he saw something the night of the murder, though no evidence supports this. The ambiguity of his statements, neither confessing nor fully clarifying, casts doubt on his involvement while prompting speculation about what Burke might have known or sensed, leaving open the question of whether he was merely a curious child or a witness to an unseen event. So, could Burke be innocent? At the time of JonBenéт Ramsey's murder on December 26, 1996, Burke Ramsey was only 9 years old, a fact that raises significant doubts about his ability to commit such a complex and violent crime. JonBenéт suffered a severe fracture and was strangled with a nylon cord tied in intricate knots, actions that forensic experts suggest would require considerable strength and skill. The garrot's sophisticated knotting, possibly linked to knowledge held by someone with experience like John Ramsey, a former Navy serviceman, seems beyond the capabilities of a child. While some investigators have speculated that Burke could have accidentally struck JonBenéт with a heavy object like a flashlight in a moment of anger, child psychologists and the Ramsey family's attorney argue that a 9-year-old lacks the physical capacity and intent to execute such a sequence of events, including staging a crime scene. The absence of evidence indicating Burke possessed exceptional strength further undermines this theory, making it unlikely that he could have inflicted the fatal injuries or orchestrated the aftermath. A critical piece of evidence supporting Burke's non-involvement is the presence of unidentified male DNA found on JonBenét's underwear and leggings, which did not match Burke or any other Ramsey family member. Analyzed in 2003 and 2008, this NEP prompted Boulder District Attorney Mary Lacey to publicly clear the Ramseys as suspects in 2008, bolstering the intruder theory championed by investigator Lo Smith. Smith argued that the DNA, found on 2 separate items, was unlikely to result from random contamination and pointed to an external perpetrator. This evidence directly contradicts theories implicating Burke, as no physical trace of him was found on the victim's clothing or body. Although some investigators have suggested the DNA could stem from manufacturing contamination or mishandling at the crime scene, no definitive proof supports this claim, leaving the DNA as a strong indicator of an outsider's involvement and a key factor in excluding Burke as the culprit. Colorado law in 1996 further complicates any case against Burke, as children under 10 were not criminally liable, deemed incapable of forming criminal intent. At 9, Burke could not have been prosecuted, even if evidence suggested his involvement, which it does not. This legal protection underscores the improbability of focusing on Burke as a suspect, as the Boulder Police Department primarily investigated John and Patsy Ramsey. The Ramsey family has emphasized that targeting Burke is legally baseless, given the lack of direct evidence tying him to the crime. While some investigators argue that this law does not preclude Burke causing an accidental death followed by parental cover-up, the absence of concrete evidence to support such a scenario weakens their position, reinforcing the argument that Burke's age and legal status make him an unlikely perpetrator. The lack of direct physical evidence connecting Burke to the crime scene is another compelling reason to doubt his involvement. No DNA, fingerprints, blood, or other forensic traces link Burke to JonBenét's body. The suspected murder weapons, such as the Maglite flashlight or the garrote, items like Burke's Swiss Army knife, found in the basement, bore no blood or DNA related to the crime. Indirect evidence, such as fingerprints on a pineapple bowl in the kitchen, only indicates Burke's presence in the home, not his participation in the murder. Speculation that the Ramseys cleaned evidence to protect Burke lacks forensic corroboration, as no signs of tampering were documented. This absence of tangible links to the crime scene strongly suggests Burke did not play a role in JonBenét's death. Burke's behavior and psychological profile as a child also support his non-involvement. During interviews with a social worker and psychologist on January 10, 1997, Burke appeared calm but displayed no signs of severe psychological disturbance or criminal behavior. His belief that JonBené was hiding somewhere when told she was missing reflects the innocence of a 9-year-old grappling with loss, not the guilt of a perpetrator. Child psychology experts consulted by the Ramseys argued that his reactions were typical for a young child, not fully comprehending death. While some investigators interpreted his calmness as suspicious, no formal psychological evaluation indicated violent tendencies or prior knowledge of the crime, aligning his demeanor with that of a shocked but uninvolved sibling. Finally, the intruder theory advanced by Lou Smith provides a plausible alternative that excludes Burke. Smith highlighted evidence like an open basement window, an unidentified shoe print, and the unidentified male Da, suggesting an outsider entered the Ramsey home. His experiments also proposed that small marks on JonBenét's body could have resulted from a stun gun, a device not found in the Ramsey household. These findings, consistent with the ransom notes narrative, support the possibility of an external killer, negating the need to implicate Burke. Although some investigators dismiss these clues as incidental, the cumulative weight of Smith's evidence, particularly the DNA, remains a significant barrier to theories involving Burke, reinforcing that he was not responsible for JonBenét's death. The JonBenet Ramsey case, nearly 3 decades after the tragic events of December 26, 1996, remains an unresolved enigma, offering profound lessons about justice, media scrutiny, and the human cost of unsolved mysteries. One enduring takeaway is the danger of premature judgment in the absence of conclusive evidence. The case has been marked by intense speculation, particularly surrounding Burke Ramsey, who was only 9 years old at the time of his sister's murder. Despite the absence of direct physical evidence, such as DNA, fingerprints, or forensic traces linking Burke to the crime, theories implicating him have persisted, fueled by media portrayals and investigative hypotheses. His role, if any, remains a mystery, and until official confirmation emerges, all accusations must be treated as speculative. This underscores the importance of withholding definitive conclusions when facts are incomplete, as rushing to judgment risks compounding tragedy with injustice. Another critical lesson is the devastating impact of public and media scrutiny on individuals caught in high-profile cases. Burke, now an adult, has lived under a cloud of suspicion for most of his life, facing relentless criticism and accusations without a trial or conviction. From a personal perspective, Burke can be seen as a victim of this case. Not only did he lose his sister at a tender age, but he has also endured a lifetime of public condemnation. This relentless scrutiny, amplified by television specials, documentaries, and tabloid coverage, has arguably imposed a punishment harsher than imprisonment. Unlike a prisoner who may eventually be released, Burke has had no reprieve from that of public opinion, where assumptions often outweigh evidence. His reserved demeanor during rare public appearances, such as his 2016 Steer Phil interview, has been unfairly weaponized against him, despite psychological explanations that such behavior may reflect trauma or discomfort rather than guilt. The case also highlights the need for restraint in expressing outrage or criticism. While individuals are entitled to their opinions, directing vitriol at Burke without substantiated proof is not only unproductive, but also perpetuates harm. The Ramsey family's legal battles, including Burke's defamation lawsuits against media outlets, reflect their struggle to reclaim dignity amid unfounded claims. These lessons compel us to approach such cases with empathy and caution, recognizing that behind every headline is a human story marked by loss and pain. Until the truth is officially uncovered, Burke's involvement remains an open question, and the case serves as a sobering reminder that justice delayed can feel like justice denied, not just for JonBenet, but for those left to bear the weight of suspicion in her absence.